we obviously see that the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole is going to continue to grow, and there's, the Appchain narrative is really going to take off. And so we see Moonbeam as kind of an easier way for folks to kind of come into the ecosystem, get exposure to the ecosystem now that XCM is enabled so that assets can go between the parachains. Now you can come into Moonbeam seamlessly, but then you can get access to the other Polkadot parachains that may not be EVM compatible, but you can start to kind of easily onboard, users, developers, things like that.
Welcome to the first episode of Beam Talk. That was an extract from an interview we've got coming up with Nate Hamilton of Purestake. He's going to talk us through what is Moonbeam, how it fits into Polkadot, what some of the exciting projects are doing in the space, what cross-chain messaging is, things we should be aware of. We look at some of the wider things happening now that we're in a downturn and the real grunt work of developments carrying on. We even have time for a little marketing game later on in the interview. So bear with us. It's my first interview of this podcast series. I hope you'll stick along for the ride and learn with me as we learn together. Let's start. So, welcome to the first episode of Beam Talk. It's the podcast series where we explore the Moonbeam ecosystem, the cross-chain projects, and the people making this ecosystem what it is. I'm Paolo, and I think 48,000 other people put some dot, in my case 100, some Polkadot into the crowd loan that helped initiate Moonbeam on the Polkadot network. That was back in December. We've got a lot of guests to come over the coming weeks. Today, I've got my very first guest, and he's from Purestake, the organization. Well, maybe he can tell us more about what Purestake's relationship with Moonbeam is. He's a director of business development at Purestake. Welcome, Nate Hamilton. Hi, Nate.
Hey, Paolo. Thanks for having me.
That's a pleasure. So for those that don't know who you are, Nate, and what you do at Purestake and Moonbeam, perhaps you could fill us in and tell us what you get up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I lead business development for Purestake, but what does that mean? Essentially, I do a lot around ecosystem for the Moonbeam ecosystem. So I talk to teams, I help them, make connections to the foundation, to other teams in the ecosystem. I help troubleshoot, problems they might be having or integrations that they're looking for. So I wear a bunch of different hats, but generally it's just focused on helping the ecosystem grow and helping teams kind of connect with one another or figure out how they can try and grow. And so the team at Purestake provide a variety of functions supporting Moonbeam as well as other networks, but generally a lot of the development has come out of the Purestake organization around Moonbeam, but we have a variety of services that we provide on the infrastructure side. We still run validators and things like that in the Polkadot ecosystem, which is great. But yeah, Purestake does a bunch in the Moonbeam ecosystem to kind of keep the core development kind of running and things around marketing and such.
So with the core development of it, is that Purestake's responsibility? How does that work with relation to Moonbeam?
No, I mean it's an open ecosystem. So if you look at the code that kind of runs Moonbeam, the Frontier repo is actually owned by Parity. Parity were the ones that created Frontier. Frontier is essentially the EVM that was created that works in the Polkadot ecosystem, and so that's owned by Parity. We're one of the core contributors, but also Parity contributes to it. A-Star contributes to it. I think that Akala contributes to it. A bunch of different teams use the Frontier repo, and then there's other pieces that that we've developed and that we've kind of added in. And so in the sense of building decentralized applications and platforms, it's one of those things where it kind of takes a village. There's a bunch of different teams that kind of collaborate, and Purestake is just one of the entities that does a bunch for Moonbeam, but that gets leveraged by a bunch of other teams as well.
Yeah, sure. There's quite a few parties involved in create what Moonbeam is today. You also touched on some of that you help the projects in the space find partners, find ways to develop. Hopefully we'll come onto some of those a bit later. Let's take a step back. How did you get into the crypto sphere, and how did you end up at Purestake? And What's your
Yeah, so
journey?
my background was traditional like tech sales, Web 2 tech sales, and business development. And I don't know, 2017, 2018, I just got kind of bored with a lot of the tech that I was working on, and I started to kind of look around and think, well, what's going to actually excite me, and what do I feel is actually transformative? A lot of the tech that I was working on, I felt like it was transformative. Early 2000s, maybe 2010s was still kind of cutting edge, but by the time that I was really getting going with it, I felt like it was a little bit past its prime. And so I always kind of wanted to be in an industry that I felt like was going to be cutting edge and growing and really could be impactful for the future. And so
Mm.
I looked around a lot, and I was like, this crypto thing. I mean, it was really after like the 2017 bubble kind of popped, or 2017-18 bubble popped. But I was like, I still fundamentally believe that like there's something here. I think the ICO mania was garbage in many ways, but
Yeah.
the underlying like technology, as well as like the core thesis of being able to decentralize, and then how people could transact from anywhere in the world using one of these networks. I believed in that, and so I started to get into. I'm outside of Boston in the States. I started to go to different like crypto meetups, and I was very much like out of place. I had no idea what anyone was really talking about, but stuff like that starts to open you up a little bit. You start to look around and realize like the people that are going to these are like really bright and really interesting and have really cool ideas and views. And so I ended up running into Derek, who is the CEO of Purestake. I ran into him at an event in the city, and I had worked for him in the past, or for an organization that he co-founded in the past. And so we just kind of started chatting, and he was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting kind of this crypto startup around validators and really more on the node and infrastructure side." And he was like, "Do you want to come kind of help build this thing out and see where we can take it?" And so that's how I joined Purestake. I was one of the kind of original employees on that side, and then how we kind of ended up in the Polkadot ecosystem was we started looking around to try and figure out what did we feel were the networks that were going to have like staying power. And proof of stake was just starting to kind of get more and more talk. And so when you look at, well, proof of stake was starting to come up, but also multi-chain was starting to get a lot of traction because these new layer ones were starting to launch. We, with those two in mind, pretty quickly are drawn to the Cosmos and Polkadot ecosystems, because those are like the core thesis of both of those ecosystems is a multi-chain world. And so did a bunch of research, looked around, ended up really kind of agreeing with the Polkadot architecture, as well as the tech stack, as well as kind of the ecosystem that had early days kind of been formed. And so got in, started running validators, checking out Kusama, Polkadot, trying to figure out, what we wanted to kind of do in this ecosystem. And pretty quickly, Derek looked around and was like, well, this EVM stuff seems to be getting a lot of traction, obviously in Ethereum, but then other ecosystems. And so he was like, what if we, tried to work on kind of creating this EVM like compatibility for the Polkadot ecosystem? And off came Moonbeam. And so I kind of fell ass backwards into kind of being like an ecosystem lead for Moonbeam. And so kind of got the training wheels were on and trying to figure out everything. And now that's 3 years ago, and we're still off and running with Moonbeam.
So why was an EVM Ethereum virtual machine? Why was it important to Moonbeam? Why was that one of the core aspects? And what did they build on top of it as well that makes it special from other EVM chains? And so yeah, why Moonbeam? Why is Moonbeam all that?
So we were just pragmatists at the end of the day, and we looked at a lot of the new chains that were launching, though they had like super novel tech. And I would agree. I think that Polkadot falls in this category. At the time we were working a lot on Algorand, and I think that they fall in those categories that amazing tech and a new tech stack, but the thing that wasn't there from day one and is still being built in both those ecosystems I mentioned is really a lot of the infrastructure to be able to support it. And so when I say that, I mean things like wallets, explorers, infrastructure frameworks to be able to deploy contracts, things like that weren't there early on because that takes time. You kind of deploy this tech and then you've got to find teams that want to build these other ancillary products around it that then continue to build. And so if you look at Ethereum, Ethereum had kind of 3, 4, 5 years under its belt by the time we started looking at building Moonbeam. And so you had all of these infrastructural pieces in place. And so, obviously take MetaMask. That was that was kind of core to the belief of, okay, you'll be able to use Moonbeam with MetaMask on day one because the account and key structure matches. That means people can easily come in from a usage standpoint. They can come and use the wallet that they're used to using. But then from the developer side, we looked at it and said, well, okay, Truffle, Remix, Hard Hat, Ganache, all of these developer frameworks were built for Ethereum and they will work on Moonbeam. Great. Now that enables developers to easily and seamlessly come develop on Moonbeam as well. And so, that's why we were pretty bullish on and continue to be bullish on the EVM, is that all of these pieces that take a lot of time were already kind of there. And so we were able to kind of build that and bring it into the Polkadot ecosystem. And so we obviously see and are making long-term bets that the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole is going to continue to grow. And there's, the Appchain narrative is really going to take off. And so we see Moonbeam as kind of an easier way for folks to kind of come into the ecosystem, get exposure to the ecosystem now that XCM is enabled so that assets can go between the parachains. Now you can come into Moonbeam seamlessly, but then you can get access to the other Polkadot parachains that may not be EVM compatible, but you can start to kind of easily onboard, users, developers, things like that. So that's why we felt the EVM was really key, especially the Polkadot ecosystem.
There's quite a few chains that tried obviously different things with EVM. So was it Avalanche has got a C chain and an M chain? I can't remember. There's 3 chains, isn't there? Make it up.
Yeah.
One's a transaction chain. Algorand, that's not EVM, is it?
No, Algorand's not EVM compatible at this point. I think they may be working on an EVM compatibility layer. I know that like Mucal Meta, which is like they have like a side chain approach. I think they're connected to Algorand. They provide EVM compatibility, but at its like core level, I don't believe Algorand has integrated an EVM. They might have an AVM, but still, I think there are changes. But take the Avalanche use case. I give them a lot of credit that they deployed the C chain early on. The C chain was their EVM compatibility chain, and so that enabled users to come in as well as developers to come in and quickly deploy things and get faster transaction speeds, lower fees, things like that in 2021. But if you look at where Avalanche, I think, is putting a lot of time from a marketing perspective, from a research perspective, it's in their subnets. And so if you step back and kind of look at that architecture, the subnets are basically parachains. Now, the subnets are EVM compatible, but it's essentially come and kind of build your own chain, but it's not, it's a much, it's not apples to apples when it comes to being your own parachain. But still, if you look at the kind of narrative, they're pushing really teams to go kind of be their own subnet. It feels like they're kind of looking at Cosmos and Polkadot and saying, well, long term, that's what we want to kind of be. We want app specific chains kind of rolling up to this C chain. And in the Polkadot ecosystem, it's really more the relay chain, and then these app specific parachains can all kind of be in there. Whereas Moonbeam is kind of one of those parachains that's just providing this kind of base layer EVM compatibility that then we can connect into these other parachains. So it's providing that functionality really for the broader Polkadot ecosystem as well.
So as someone that's like obviously followed crypto but not living crypto like yourself, and on a day-to-day basis, we've seen several aspects of the last cycle that went. There was different layer ones, and there was a whole layer 2 faster Ethereum things, Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, cheaper, faster. So they seem to fit into the narrative of where it's going for the next few years, certainly, and the whole cross the bridges and the ways to transfer assets across from these networks to the base layer, the Ethereum, or to each other, and tools like Stargate came out and have changed how that happens in the bridges. And they've not been without problems, some of these bridges, but so we kind of, this multi-chain world is here, and it's not just the Bitcoin maximalist, Ethereum maximalist. There seems to be a multi-chain future coming in some way, certainly for the foreseeable steps, and that's really where Moonbeam comes in, is what you're saying, in this multi-chain, cross-chain connected world. And I guess we've got Polkadot, which is the bigger, that it's the layer 0 that the Moonbeam's on. Can you talk a bit about the cross-chain aspect and how that sits in either with Polkadot or with the other chains, such as the layer 2s I've just talked about, Optimism, Arbitrum, and how Moonbeam fits into this cross-connected world, and what are cross-chain apps?
Absolutely. And so, there's a lot to unpack there. And so internally to Polkadot, one of the core theses of the Polkadot, the team at Parity, when they were building Polkadot, was, cross-chain is really hard. And so the more you can trust minimize the need or the bridging experience, the better it will be. And so they built into Polkadot, they built this feature called XCM. And so XCM is basically what powers trustless bridging between parachains. And so that was released, I want to say, like 6 months ago into Polkadot, and probably 9 months ago into Kusama. And so it's still early days on really working through the use cases of how XCM can be utilized, where think of a world where you can build an application and say, maybe you need decentralized storage, you could get that from a parachain. If you need decentralized identity, you can get that from a platform. You need, just compute, you can get that from another parachain. And having them all composed together using XCM to create a truly decentralized application, that's kind of, in my view, that's kind of like the end goal. That's still going to take a little bit of time to get there, but we're starting to see some use cases kind of come to fruition with folks like Centrifuge that we're working with, or Manta, or Equilibrium. We're working through not just the assets being able to be moved, but like what other kind of use cases can be facilitated using message passing. And so
because Ethereum can't hold storage, Ethereum can't do computing outside of the transactional nature. What were the other things you said? Storage, compute,
the identity.
So there's other technologies that are being developed right now for identity, and that's a whole world, isn't it? It's not just the wallet login. You can have soul-bound tokens people have explored, and I think there's like you say, that's where it does become interesting for the future of the internet, right? It's not here yet, though, right? There's not.
And so I mean that's the whole goal of Polkadot and Cosmos is this Appchain thesis of building an application specific blockchain that does one thing very, very well. It's whether it's DeFi, whether it's some kind of NFT platform, whether it's a decentralized identity things that I might not even know about today. That was always the thesis, and I think we're starting to see that play out. And so for Moonbeam, we obviously work internally to Polkadot using XCM. Now, externally, because of the EVM, it provides us the ability to connect into these what I'd call like next generation bridges. They kind of call themselves general message passing platforms. So whether that's layer 0, we mentioned Stargate, Axelar, Wormhole, Hyperlane. There are a bunch of these teams that they're focusing on, obviously assets is like the first use case of taking one asset from one chain, moving it to another chain, and being as secure as possible, so that users can move funds around between these chains. That's one piece, but the general message passing piece is really going to start to open up use cases in terms of when you're not physically having to, lock an asset on one side and mint it on the other side. You're just sending a message that says, hey, this action has been triggered on this chain. Now do this on this chain, but the assets aren't having to move. That's going to change the way users can interact with these protocols, which is really exciting. Now, that, like I said, XCM is still early days. That the GMP protocols are very, very early days. So we are seeing, kind of the first use cases of GMP. I think you're getting ready to go live in the next couple of months. They've been building for, at least that we're aware of, that are building on Moonbeam. They've been building for 8-9 months, and so they've been building from day one to be natively multi-chain, versus things that have launched prior are now having to integrate multi-chain. And so I think it's going to change the way applications are created. So from day one, they'll be natively multi-chain, and they'll be able to use this message passing framework, these protocols. That I think that's going to be a catalyst for 2023 is seeing these launch and what they can do that couldn't be done in the past when GMP protocols weren't available at the time.
And what applications have they got in the pipeline then for GMP?
I think two that come to mind are lending and borrowing use cases that can do things cross-chain. So take an example. I don't know if I can really mention the team, but I would say, so take a user on one chain says, hey, look, I'm gonna lend in, call it my Matic token. But then they're over on Avalanche and there's an NFT drop going on or something along those lines that they want to get into. Traditional bridging says you have to take your assets from Matic, lock them up on Matic, and then unlock them on Avalanche, and then you can kind of use them. But in some of these new lending and borrowing protocols, it says, well, why do I have to necessarily do that? If they've already locked up Matic on Polygon, they should just be able to unlock that on Avalanche or Moonbeam or wherever it may be, wherever they're connected to. And so being able to do that in a way that doesn't actually have to move the assets between these chains is pretty revolutionary. And so I think it'll open up some new use cases and some new ways to be able to kind of lower the user friction when it comes to growing cross-chain. But then there's even
ultimately the user doesn't care what platform it's on, or that and that's when NFTs were like exciting, because they were exciting in their own right, and it was the product that people wanted, not that they were on a specific chain, Ethereum or whatever. And I guess that's probably going to be part of the next wave, is where it's kind of platform not agnostic, but like 100%. Where people don't necessarily are married to a chain. Yeah, I don't care, as long as they can have a wallet that can interact with it, right?
Absolutely. And that's what these teams are really focused on, are these kind of like SDKs where an application can embed these cross-chain GMP providers in a way that says, like, with one click, a user should be able to facilitate something and not really know or care what chain they're on. And so that is certainly, that's going to be a huge improvement from a UI UX perspective for end users, which in crypto has always been like a huge barrier to entry for people, is not being able to really understand how to interact with things, whether it's just wallets are getting better, but then layering in these GMP teams that say, well, you should be able to get into whatever, NFT drop or yield, DeFi yield farming or whatever it is. You should be able to get into that regardless of what chain you have assets on. And that's what they're going to be kind of powering. And we see Moonbeam as one of the places for the Polkadot ecosystem to kind of be that port of entry into Polkadot because of the EVM. And so that's where we kind of come in.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, we're related to that. You mentioned on Layer 0 and Axelar, was it? And Wormhole.
Yep.
And they're the core system. So basically they have a contract on each side of the network, and that's so on Avalanche and on Moonbeam, and it does the technology that I don't understand how it works, but it doesn't. You don't have to actually send it; it just locks it up and then releases it on the other side, and that's part of the future.
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, like traditional bridges, like what they would do, it'd be called like a mint and burn. So it would basically be like you would lock it up on one side and it would mint it on the other. And then if you wanted to go back, it would unlock it and unlock, or you would have to lock it up and then it would unlock it. But that creates issues where, you know, you start locking up all these funds on one side of a chain, then hackers start looking at, okay, well, how can we game this? Because they've become honeypots in many ways because people are locking up all these funds. But with this new general message passing piece, it gets away from having to actually lock those assets, because essentially all you're having to do is send like a request from one chain saying, hey, this user on Matic or Moonbeam has these funds. They would like to start interacting on Avalanche with these funds. Great. Make that swap. And so it's not actually the bridge that's holding those assets. It's the protocol on each side that says, yeah, okay, I'm now on Moonbeam's instance. Great. The user can use whatever they had, whatever they have on Matic as well. And same for like NFTs, where we have a team that is going cross-chain using these general message passing frameworks to say, well, like, I'm not looking to lock up the NFTs. I just want to be able to create races across these different platforms where the stats and things kind of aggregate back to a home chain, and it opens up their total addressable market, because they can go talk to, you know, whether it's BSC or AVAX or whatever it is, they can go say, hey, we can do a bunch of really cool stuff with these NFTs over here, but they're not necessarily having to like move all of the NFTs between these chains. It's just I think we're like barely starting to scratch the surface of what general message passing can facilitate. And I'm excited to see that really for 2023 into 2024 start to have teams start to really understand what these GMP providers can do and how that can be impactful moving forward. We actually just ran a hackathon with the four that I mentioned. So Layer 0, Axelar, Wormhole, and Hyperlane. We just ran a hackathon.
Okay.
And I think it was the first time that we'd gotten, or that these, they're obviously competitive. They're general message passing protocols. They're all kind of competitive with each other to get devs, users, things like that. But we managed to get them all to come together on this hackathon, because we basically said, look, like, education is key here. So yes, you can be competitive, but ultimately, like, we got to get more developers who understand how to use the general message passing framework or arbitrary message passing framework, whatever vernacular they use, because we haven't seen tons and tons and tons of use cases come out yet, because it is such early days. So it is, I think, something that's going to be really impactful for the next couple of years.
And so, Nate, that's part of what you're doing then, is like you had the Ignite conference, right?
Yep.
In November, you're doing hackathons.
Yep.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about some of the other ways you're bringing new interest into the Moonbeam ecosystem. How are you encouraging developers? How you're getting users to want to play around with the technology, incentivizing them or not, and how you're getting projects that are on other networks to like say, yeah, we'll have a go at doing something on Moonbeam and bring our app over to your platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think there's cross-chain teams, like you mentioned, that are maybe on these other ecosystems. I think generally those teams today are almost always looking at, okay, what ecosystems are a must to kind of plug into to be able to get,
So that's like Aave. They came to you fairly on, right? Is that
well, we didn't end up working with Aave. We have spoken to them in the past, but it would be like Sushi Swap. I mean, they were very aggressive in terms of their expansion. But I think most teams at this point do have a multi-chain kind of thesis, because at the end of the day, you have to expand your total addressable market. And so how do you do that? You go find the ecosystems that have loyal users and deploy there, and then figure out the best way to get usage across your platform in that ecosystem. And so generally it's it's Ethereum, obviously, but then it's Binance Smart Chain, it's AVAX, it's Polkadot. And when you think Polkadot, generally it ends up being Moonbeam. That was kind of that's some of the value that we provide to the Polkadot ecosystem, because we have that EVM compatibility. It makes it really easy to deploy. And so you look across these the teams that are going multi-chain, and Moonbeam is generally seen as one of those places folks want to get deployed because of the Moonbeam ecosystem, but then also the broader Polkadot ecosystem, which is large as well. But then internally, we've got a lot of teams that are launching natively, and I think that when we
so that means they're going first on Moonbeam, yeah, and
correct.
that's where they're starting there.
Correct. They're kind of calling Moonbeam home, and I think generally they will have what we call a connected contract strategy. So it is that multi-chain strategy using these GMP providers. We call it connected contracts. But yeah, native teams mean they're kind of natively launching first on Moonbeam, and then we'll kind of expand from there. And generally, like why folks pick Moonbeam, and I think there are a variety of reasons. One is our focus on interoperability, and so I think that we continue to strive to make Moonbeam the most interoperable place in the entire crypto ecosystem. And so whether that's the EVM with these GMP providers, whether that's XCM internally to Polkadot, we're generally always focused on providing the best interoperability that we can. And I think we also strive to have an ecosystem of collaboration. And so I think that we continue to see a lot of teams deploy and then get connected to, oh, well, I got to think about, are there lending and borrowing platforms? Are there other NFT ecosystems? Are there other, just developer frameworks I need to go work on? We try and make it as developer friendly as well as ecosystem friendly as possible, so that when developers are looking around, they say, well, this ecosystem's got a lot of really cool teams building. And I think that's ultimately what's going to be successful, is you bring a lot of teams together and foster a collaboration, an ecosystem of collaboration. I think you can start to find use cases and teams that say, hey, 1 + 1 can equal 3 here. Let's all work together to try and figure out better way to make the ecosystem better, as well as their platforms better.
So looking at DeFi Llama, they've got, I don't know, all chains. Ethereum's got 625 protocols on it. I don't know what they mean exactly by that. BSC, Binance Smart Chain, 521. Optimism, 96. And then you've got like some Moonbeams on, some Moon Rivers, 54 there. Where's Moonbeam? 44, it says. So yeah, I don't know what they mean by 44 protocols, but I imagine that's significant DeFi projects of some kind. So and that's the kind of things you're trying to get on board, as well as building native ones, right? That have some key part of the Moonbeam, the reason why people go there and want to use it.
I mean, ultimately, so there's a report that comes out once a year. It's called the Electric Capital Report, and it basically takes an entire year to just go look at ecosystems and look at GitHub repositories, and then it starts to aggregate like where developers are building. And so, I think that ultimately we always believe that just creating a good platform for builders to come build on and help create this ecosystem of collaboration will continue to drive developers to kind of show up here. And we continue to see, we help support the Moonbeam Foundation when it comes to grant calls, things like that. And we continue to see a massive uptake in terms of applications for grants. We just kicked off an incubator with a team called Rocker that's going to have 10 teams that end up getting incubated by them, and there's a huge inflow of applications into that. And so I think if I wanted to like equate it to like a baseball game, I think like Moonbeam is in like the second inning, right? The first inning was 2022, really trying to just get live, get launched, get all the integrations kind of there, stable, running. And now we're going to start to see in 2023, and I actually think the bear market helps us, is we're going to see teams that come and say, I want to build somewhere that I can be impactful, and I want to create something that is truly decentralized and in an ecosystem that has like good teams building. And so I think that we're positioned well to support that with all the initiatives that between the Moonbeam Foundation or collaborations in the ecosystem are kicking off. I think we're positioned well to really grow that developer number moving into 2023 into 2024.
So build it and they will come. Build the tools and the infrastructure that developers can easily use. encourage them with online conferences and incubators and collaborations, introducing them to the network. And in a way, it's kind of good that we're not in a crypto bull cycle, which means you can get on with the hard work of actually the grit work of actually building. And yeah, people can get their heads down and over the next 12 months, 18 months, get some products out there, or build up those applications that use these technologies and that. Can we go through some categories and like let's see and maybe look at some projects that are using the space? I mean, in the last bull run, so there was like, it started off probably with decentralized exchanges, like Uniswap was probably one of the early catalysts that went quite early. DeFi apps like Aave, Maker. Then there's a whole, when everyone was in lockdown, the meme coin thing, SafeMoon, Dodge, BSC, everything on BSC went nuts. And you know, the whole Moon Lambo thing on TikTok, that was quite entertaining during lockdown. Then all the alternative chains came out, I guess, and Solana and that, and then layer twos like Polygon and Matic or whatever, and Optimism did an airdrop at some point. I can't remember when that was. And then the whole NFT. How can we forget NFTs? You know, and OpenSeas. I think it went from was it 220 million the total market size in 2020 to 23 billion at the peak, where people sold a collectible for one-off art for 6.6 million, and CryptoPunk 3001 sold for 7.58 million. So yeah, can we go through some categories? So DeFi, what's happening on? You've got Curve, right, on Moonbeam, not Aave. So, that's why I got confused.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So right now where things are is like, I think that right now the teams are starting to really collaborate. If you look at the governance proposals, there was a big one back in October between the team at Moonwell and StellaSwap around kind of building a base layer of liquidity in an ecosystem and what that kind of requires. And so today, you know, there's a variety of things to kind of do, but right now it is really, it's been building for a couple months to get the liquidity there. And then you'll start to see more and more teams that are focused on like what I'd say, like, I don't know, like DeFi 2.0 or 3.0 applications, whether it's like options or synthetics or leverage trading, that like you kind of need these pillars of like stable dexes as well as or stable swaps, AMM dexes, lending and borrowing, compound Aave style lending borrowing. And then on top of that, you'll see more and more, I guess, like exotic things start to come. And I think that you'll start to see, we've been speaking to a lot of different teams that are getting ready to go live. I mean, the funny part is that like there are a ton of teams that have been building since, call it like January, March, April timeframe, that have, you know, we're in the process of raising and have now been building for 6-8 months, that are getting ready to go live on Moonbeam. And so I'm really excited to see some of these new DeFi primitives that are going to be going live in the next 3 to 6 months, and see what kind of takes off, what kind of takes shape, what the ecosystem does with some of these new things that are going to get built. That's really exciting to me for sure.
So you've got like Lido staking, which was
Lido's deployed. Lido does ST.dot and STKSM. So for both ecosystems, those are both fully live today. You mentioned Curve. Curve is live on Moonbeam.
Does it boil down to total value locked ultimately, and then like the trust in the network for those DeFi primitives then can amplify and expand, and it just more funds keep coming in and more projects can feel that have the liquidity to launch, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You kind of there needs to be like, for DeFi to thrive, there needs to be kind of this like base layer liquidity so that things can then like, it's almost like, it's like DeFi Legos is kind of how they're referred to. They kind of build on top of each other. And so there are just pieces that need to be there. And look, I mean, even if we step back, if you look at like the Polkadot ecosystem, there are two big things that will be in place probably in the next couple of months. So USDT can now natively be minted to StateMine, which is the common good parachain in Polkadot. And so USDT is now native to Polkadot, which is great. And we also saw that Circle announced a couple months ago, USDC will also be native to Polkadot as well. And so those are two other key drivers that'll start to bring more and more folks into the ecosystem, because there are just practical realities of like funds and money managers and things like that, where they may not be able to use bridges. They may need to be able to mint natively if they want to be able to be active in an ecosystem. And so
I didn't realize that USDC wasn't on Moonbeam. That's so yeah.
Well, there's bridged USDC, and certainly there is a bunch of liquidity for that today. But I think that there'll be even more once Circle can mint natively to Polkadot, because that USDC can be brought right to Moonbeam. And so that's certainly that's going to be very interesting once that happens as well. So like I said, all these like Legos kind of snap together, whether it's Curve, whether it's Teleswap or Moonwell or Midas, or some of these new teams that are going to go live, like Damn Finance and Prime Protocol and Coda.
And is this one you want to pick out, just like that's interesting? You said, I don't know which one of those is worth talking about or that's interesting to you. I bet they're all interesting, but
if I can avoid it, I would love to not, single anybody out. Ultimately, like I try and love all the protocol, all the deployments equally, and we always want to make sure that we're not playing favorites in many ways. And so
there's a website, dtmb.xyz, Downtime Moonbeam, that's got a list of all the projects that are working on Moonbeam, and that's you can see what's going on.
And that's community curated. It's an awesome site. We love the fact that folks kind of spun that up. It gives you stats. It shows you teams deployed. They're doing a bunch of different stuff in the ecosystem in terms of AMAs and whatnot to really help spread the word about what's usable in Moonbeam today and Moonriver for that matter. And so absolutely, DTMB is awesome.
Okay, so an exchange, there's a couple of exchanges that have got significant volume. What's the main one? Is it Stellar Swap's the main one? Is that the main one, or?
There's Beam Swap and Stellar Swap. Those are two of the ones that have, I think, the most volume on Moonbeam today. But I think there are a variety of dexes on Moonbeam that can
so when people interact with the chain, like from a complete newbie point of view, what are the on-ramps to Moonbeam? Is there any direct on-ramps to Moonbeam that are being used at the moment? Is from fiat to it, or are people having to go?
I think there are a variety of ways to get into Moonbeam. I don't know if I can specifically talk about or give credence to certain on-ramps, but certainly there are a variety of ways to start interacting with the protocols that are live.
Because ultimately, if for a new user, if there's an app they want to get onto, and if there's an easy way to get onto it, then we're seeing like is PayPal's introducing it in some countries. You can buy crypto straight away. I don't know what their wallet's like. It's obviously not MetaMask. But the gateways are coming more, and obviously Jack Dorsey is doing something. I don't know what he's doing with all his block companies, mainly focused on Bitcoin. But there's with his payments aspect, there's bound to be closer integration with the real financial system and the crypto financial sphere. I'm
intrigued and encouraged by a lot of these what I call like large Web2 players that are looking at whether it's Stripe, integrating Stripe into crypto. That's a huge deal. Or like you said, PayPal. I think that the more ways that users can start interacting with different crypto assets, the better. And I think the the less friction that can be provided from a user onboarding experience, I think it just makes it's going to make it significantly easier, better for folks to interact with all this kind of stuff.
So NFTs brought us closer to a kind of a everyman app or everyman product in digital assets. And I think Instagram was testing with it at some point, and you could content creators could natively create digital assets that are on a blockchain. I can't remember which blockchain it was. It was probably one of the layer 2s on Ethereum, and I don't think that progressed more. But yeah, and then you see like Elon Musk of Twitter, and they're rolling out badges. I think affiliation badges. So at some point, there's probably going to be the NFTs a lot more integrated with it. But yeah, so I mean, NFTs was a massive bubble, and obviously there's some truth in it. There's some actual use in it, whether that's the collectibles, the art point of view. And we didn't really see much of the real world use of NFTs. Like, this represents a real world asset. And I guess, that's probably the general messaging platform that might enable that at some point. Well, one example I was thinking of the other day, my brother does these park runs. I don't know if you have them stateside, where every Saturday you just turn up at a public park and everybody does a run and it's timed, and you get your time, and then like you get like a badge at 10, 20, 50, 100, like, it's like that could be an NFT, right?
Totally.
And the same way that your Ed Sheeran concert that you go to, you could have the actual event and you have the matching ticket stub that's worth something, right? And we haven't seen these use cases happen yet, and I wonder how they are going to come out into the NFT world. But do you have any examples of what's happening on Moonbeam with NFTs or gaming or the metaverse that's of interest?
Yeah, I mean, I back to your point of digital collectible versus NFT. And I think one of the interesting things is that you saw, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, Reddit dropping their digital collectibles. But what they did was they called them digital collectibles. They didn't mention NFTs. And I think that for the audience in Reddit, folks were like, oh, this is cool. Like, I got this digital collectible and whatever. And then it was, well, if you peel back then, it was just an NFT. It wasn't an NFT. And so these, all of a sudden, they had all this uptake, but folks weren't, folks who may have thought NFTs were like stupid or something, but they had this like digital collectible that they got from Reddit, they're actually into it. And so I actually think that things along those lines, I think, will become more and more prevalent, where like you mentioned, concert tickets or things of the like, that you'll get like a digital representation of it or a digital collectible, and getting away from just calling it an NFT. I think that because of the chaos of like 2021 run up and the NFT kind of mania that ensued, I think people have actually moved away from trying to call things NFTs. But I do think that we're starting to get to the point where you'll be able to utilize NFTs for real world, use cases and digital collectibles from artists. Like, there's a team in the ecosystem called Public Pressure that they're focused on NFTs in music, and so they're doing some really cool stuff. They're working with Moonbeam, they're working with Exosama to kind of bring artists into this crypto ecosystem, and I think that those are really cool use cases specifically for creators. But then you obviously have you have folks like Centrifuge who are doing real world assets on chain, so like invoices being able to be created into NFTs, and then users be able to kind of purchase those and provide quick liquidity, but get yield against that. We've spoken to, that has been something that I've seen a larger inflow of over the past, call it 2 or 3 months, is creating these kind of platforms where real world use cases can start to be created into NFTs, and then have kind of a dual-sided marketplace that they're actually trying to solve real world use cases, which
but often you need the legal entity side of it solved as well, don't you? Because it's like well, it's digital, but then does that actually, the real world, a property deed for a house or whatever, it's like, well, yes, you can say it's represented on the blockchain, but that doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction or the legal rights unless all the paperwork's done correctly, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep. I mean, that was
so
one of those, like, that was definitely one of those things, I think, like back in 2017, 18, it was like, oh, like property rights will all be on a blockchain. And I think eventually, yeah, it takes a long time though. I think there's just like there's just going to be these kind of waves of creation and waves of innovation that need to happen, whether it's the infrastructural tools, whether it's the comfort level, whether it's, there's just going to have to be kind of first movers who actively start to get these things. But then that's going to take time to get, big enterprise to start saying, oh, it's more efficient, I can save money, I can, like, the benefits I can get are there and the infrastructure is there. Then you'll start to see these, these use cases that were really talked about 6-7 years ago will actually start to come to fruition. I still think we've got a little ways to go though.
I think so, for like Airbnb on the blockchain or Uber on the blockchain. One that was interesting, I don't know if you saw it, was Nouns DAO. So crossing over into DAOs, and Noun was like NFT access to, well, you bought an NFT, they're auctioned daily, and they hold a value, and then you can vote on what the treasury does with the money that gets from the sale of the nouns. So like NFT membership to stuff, and I think that's quite a very accessible thing right now that can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of it's not on Moonbeam, I wish it was, but it's called Links DAO. I have one of the NFTs, but it's a golf DAO where you get benefits. So like I think they partner with like Callaway. Callaway gives like 20% off discount for Links DAO NFT holders. You get discounted rates at certain courses that they've partnered with, or attire companies that they're partnering with. Eventually their goal is to like buy a golf course as a DAO. And so like stuff like that I think is actually really cool. I mean, I bought it because I like golfing, and though I have 2 little kids and a third on the way, I don't have time to golf anymore. But I still think it's
same as me for kite surfing. But,
exactly. So imagine the Kite DAO where they partner with manufacturers, things like that. You get all these people that like something and want to collaborate, and then with an end goal of, hey, we're gonna create an event, or we're gonna do this. And it is pretty cool to start seeing these NFTs that, because you're part of this ecosystem, you can get access to these. Now think about, like we talked about earlier, when creators are able to kind of create these NFTs where their fans are able to get these experiences. I think that's going to be really cool. I think it started to happen, but I think it'll get more and more mainstream as user adoption can pick up.
XDAO, that's on Moonbeam, I think, as well. They allowed you to create a DAO. Will constitute, well,
yeah, there's XDAO. I think there's some DAO as well. I think that I don't want to leave anybody out. I think there's others as well, but I think that DAO frameworks, being able to enable folks to kind of create DAOs seamlessly, there are a lot of like hard problems to tackle when you create a DAO, in terms of like voting, in terms of funds, things like that I think that those are big challenges that these teams are looking to solve, and is super, super interesting to see how they can kind of crack those nuts.
Okay. I asked ChatGPT to come up with some marketing slogans for Moonbeam. So quick fire, you say yes, no, or give me a one-line answer to it. Okay. So ChatGPT, if you don't know, is the AI thing that everyone is talking about on the internet. So okay, let's go. Connecting all the dots for Moonbeam.
Ooh, I like
yes,
that.
no, or meh.
I mean, if connecting all the dots in Polkadot, I would agree with it. I think it's interesting.
Moonbeam, your one-stop shop for cross-chain compatibility.
Ooh, I like that. I think marketing might need to get an account for ChatGPT.
Moonbeam, the grand central station of blockchain.
I'll take it. Sure. Sounds good.
Moonbeam, the glue that holds the centralized world together.
The centralized world?
Decentralized world.
Decentralized world together.
Moonbeam, the glue that holds the decentralized world together.
Maybe one day. I think we're getting there. We're getting there.
Moonbeam, the disco of the cross-chain integration. I think it went a bit left field there. That's
All right.
disco mingling. It kind of works.
Yeah, I'll take it. I think that anytime you can work disco into a sentence is always interesting to me.
Moonbeam, where the magic of cross-chain happens.
Oh, come on. That's a little that sounds like it was written by some PR agency came up with that for, a Web2 company. That's a little too far.
Moonbeam, bringing the blockchain universe together, one cross-chain at a time.
Oh, yeah, that's
the same.
Say that painful. That's like 1990s like McDonald's commercial or something.
I don't know what's going on about here, but Moonbeam, the ultimate chain gang. I mean, are you all in jail or something?
Interesting. Yeah, it's got a weird connotation to it.
The last one, this is quite good, I think. Moonbeam, the chain that goes where no chain has gone before. It sounds like a lager, I think, or something.
Sounds kind of dirty, yeah.
So the winner you liked was Moonbeam, the grand central station of blockchain, connecting all the dots with Moonbeam or something like that. They were the best ones that ChatGPT came up with. I think you liked.
That's cool. I like it. I haven't played around with that. I've just been a little busy, but I that is really like crypto Twitter is filled with just like AI stuff right now.
So I asked it to come up with a Moonbeam joke as well. So are you ready? Why did Moonbeam get kicked out of the cross-chain support group?
Why?
Because it kept trying to one-up all the other chains with its compatibility. I mean, that's not bad that AI came up with that, right?
I mean, the AI stuff continues to just like amaze me, and it's pretty scary, to be honest. But that is pretty amazing for it to be able to try and have like the nuance of trying to create a joke is like astounding that software can just do that now.
So Nate, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up, or is there one thing about Moonbeam you want to say that we haven't mentioned? Maybe.
No, so it's. I'm glad we connected. I mean, you and I connected like 2 weeks ago after the Illuminate event. I think I just followed up with folks that wanted to chat, and you just kind of ran the idea by me about like, hey, I might do like a Moonbeam podcast. It's like, oh, sweet, that'd be awesome. Let's do it. I think I think that's the kind of thing that the ecosystem will be really, really interested in, and I think you'll. I'm really excited someone's kind of taking the torch and kind of running with it, and so happy to have kind of been the first one here. I do have to say nothing I've said is financial advice or endorsement of anything. It's you always got to have that kind of disclaimer out there, but I do appreciate you doing this, and I'm excited to see the other teams that you bring on, and this is awesome.
Thanks for your time, Nate, and catch you in the next one.